Good morning, Royal We Fellowship. I'm glad that you're here today. We're going to be talking about being divided. I want to go ahead and open up in prayer. Father, you are in heaven. How holy is your name? And we wait for your kingdom to come and your will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day everything that we need and forgive us of the sin in our lives as we work to forgive others who have sinned against us. Lead us not into a path of temptation and deliver us from the hands of evil. Father, for yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. And everybody said, Amen. Now, as I said, we're going to be talking about division because right now division is a huge thing. How many of you are aware of this division that is taking place? It's all around us. And how many of you are aware that division is nothing new? Some people think that division is because of race, and division is because of politics, or division is because of religion. But we're going to take a look at the ancient literature that's been given to us and provided through the Bible that's going to tell us that division is something completely different. We know that division is not because of race. We know that division is not because of politics alone or because of religion, because we see division in our own homes. We see division in families. We see division in marriages. We see division in businesses. We see division everywhere, which is an indicator that division has nothing to do with race, has nothing to do even with politics, has nothing to do with culture, if you will. We know that division exists. We don't quite understand it, but the ancient literature given to us has an explanation for it, and it's something that we need to grasp and we should understand. And so we're going to be taking a look at the idea that division, according to the ancient literature that's given to us from the beginning, is a principle that's been given to us. It's a principle that's been given to us by God, according to the ancient literature. So we're going to go back to the very beginning where this principle was established for us, this principle of living, this way that we've been given. We're going to go to the very beginning because this is where it was first indicated in the book of Genesis, which is the ancient literature. This is the ancient understanding of how everything came to be, as far as our story, as far as what you and I know, as far as the world that you and I live in. Genesis is the beginning of that. And this is what we're going to take a look at because this is where this concept of division that you and I live in takes place. So if we look at the very beginning of Genesis, the very first thing that we see is this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, period. Now we are aware that this right here is a complete sentence. It's a complete thought. It's a complete idea. It stands on its own. It stands completely on its own. Now, most of you are aware of this, and this is what the ancient literature has to tell us about the beginning of the world. And most of us have accepted this as a chronological beginning that goes from point A through our existence. And it probably is. However, according to the ancient literature, it's not a chronicle. It's not a chronicle laid out schematic of what they're talking about God and who God is and God's creation. Right? And I'm going to show you what I mean. The very next verse, after in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, period, which is a complete sentence. It stands on its own. Let's take this idea, if you will. Let's take this sentence and let's put it up here for a minute. We're going to set it off on the side and we're going to go to the very next. Go to the very next sentence, the very next verse. It says this, that the earth, and it says and in the English translation, it says, and the earth was formless and void, and darkness covered the surface of the deep. Now, if we look at the image that we have of the earth at this point, it's dark, it's chaotic. As a matter of fact, some of the words used in the original Hebrew language of the text of the literature says it was chaotic. It was a mess. It was dark. It was empty. It was nothing. It was a wasteland. All right. This is the image. Furthermore, this is a very interesting Hebrew word that's used here, where we know it as the earth was dark and formless and void and chaotic. After we see that God created the heavens and the earth, we take that word was, right? The earth was dark and void and formless. We take that word was and we automatically put it in a chronological order, meaning, well, first he said earth, then he said darkness. No. If we look at the Hebrew language, and this is important to understand division. This is why we're going through this. If we look at the Hebrew word, the word is kashak, right? Which actually means to become. So what is really being said in the ancient literature is the earth had become dark and void and empty and chaotic. It had become a wasteland. This is literally the ancient literature, what it says in regards to the earth in the beginning. So we have God created the heavens and the earth, period. And then the next verse is, and it came to pass, it came to be. The earth had become dark and void and chaotic. It came to be. Now, in order to understand division, I'm going to introduce you into two different theological ideas that maybe you're aware of, maybe not. There's a theological idea out there. One is what we already talked about, that it's a chronological story and that God began the creation process according to the literature, and the ancient people are trying to tell us that God formed it chaotically, and then here we are. There's another theology, another idea. It's called the gap theory, and maybe some of you have heard of this, where God created, according to the literature, ancient literature, the heavens and the earth at some point, period. Something happened. We don't know what it looked like. Maybe there was a pre-Adamic race. Pre-Adamic means before Adam. Maybe there was a pre-Adam civilization, and this is called the gap theory. Something traumatic and drastic happened, and it just destroyed the world, turned it into a dark wasteland. And then we pick up at that point when there's a reestablishment of for you and for me, and then it begins into our story. So it's not the creation story, but Genesis is a recreation story, if you will. This is one of the two theologies, and there's probably more theologies, but those are the two more popular theologies. And we have to be careful in this area because we can get wrapped up in it. I was asking every Christian pastor that I knew, and I even met with some rabbis. Now, in Western Christianity, they're going to dismiss even wanting to talk about it. And the reason is most Western Christian teachers are going to say it has nothing to do with your salvation. It makes no sense to talk about that. And they're going to say it has nothing to do with your salvation, and on and on and on. They stay away from that. Most Western teachers stay away from the Old Testament. Too much of that anyways, because there's a lot of weird stuff. But I also talked to some rabbis because I really wanted to know. I was in a search for what a rabbi shared with me, something that I shouldn't be searching for, and I'll tell you why. The first rabbi I met, I really met with a rabbi. It was an interesting conversation. It was at a Hebrew convention. And this rabbi was sitting there dressed in black. He had his doily hair, beard down to here. I mean, he was a rabbi. And there was a line of people who wanted to talk with him. The piece of this individual was just something amazing. And I sat down with him. And I said, I have questions about things that Christianity doesn't teach. I want to know what is before in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, period. And the earth was formless and void. What is there? And the rabbi looked at me. He says, Says you're into the mysticism of the Bible, the mystical. And then he asked me this question. He says, "Why do you want to know the mystical? Why do you want to know the mysteries? What is that going to do for your faith? How is your faith?" And I looked at that. I'm like, that's kind of like what Christian teachers would tell me. That doesn't help me at all. But I understood what he was saying, and I now understand even further. The next rabbi helped me understand it even more. The next rabbi that I spoke with, and out of frustration, I said, "There's got to be more than what we're taught. What took place in the beginning? What happened between God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth was dark and formless and void?" I know there's a theory out there called the gap theory, and I was so intrigued by this. And the rabbi had this to say. He helped me understand the ancient literature more, the Hebrew language more. And he said this. He said, there's a reason why the Bible in the book of Genesis, it begins with the Aleph. It's a symbol. It's the beginning of the Hebrew alphabet, but it also is symbolic. The Aleph Tav. It's symbolic of many things. And there's mysteries behind the Aleph. And by the way, according to the ancient literature, the Bible is full of mysteries. The Bible is mystical. There's a lot of mysticism in there. Mysteries that we're going to talk about right here that aren't for us. But the Aleph Tav in the Kabbalistic literature is actually split. One of the meanings of the Aleph Tav, and you see it in the ancient Hebrew language right before in the beginning. It's right there. It's the very first thing. And in the Kabbalistic where am I going with that? In the Kabbalistic literature, sorry, that Aleph Tav is actually split into what's called two yods. Okay, now the upper part of the yod, it's yod, Y-O-D. The upper part of the yod literally means, and I'm looking at the description here. It literally represents the hidden and infinite that belongs to God. The lower part of the yod, in front of in the beginning, represents like a finger pointing that way, saying this is the revelation given from God to man. So what we have is this emblem that the whole literature of the Bible starts with. It's a symbol that says, basically, here's two yods. Here's the Aleph Tav. Up here, going that way, going before this page, before this writing, is the hidden mysteries of God. It belongs to God. It belongs to the heaven. It's not for us to know. This part of the yod pointing this way, from here on out, this is for you. This is for mankind. This is for every man, woman, and child. This is the revelation for you to know. That's it. That's it. That's what that symbol means. And it's like a wall, according to the ancient Hebrew literature. You can't go past that. And I struggled with the rabbi, and I said, but why? It's not right. Why would according to the ancient literature, why would things be shut out from us? Because it can help us to understand a lot of what we're going through. And that's when the rabbi said, but Kevin, it's not. It's not completely shut out. If you really want to search for these things, you'll find it sprinkled here and there throughout the entire Bible. And I did. So if you want to know, and that's not what this message is about, but if you want to know what the beginning of creation looked like, you can find it sprinkled throughout the book of Job. Right? And where in the literature, God has a conversation with Job saying, where were you when I created the foundations and I measured this and I measured that and the angels were singing for glory? This is what the creation looked like. Okay? And the rabbi went on and said, and if you look, you can see glimpses and pictures here and there of the fall of Satan in the ancient literature. Right? Jesus said, I saw Satan fall like lightning. Well, when did that happen? That wasn't documented anywhere else in the Bible. So these are things that even the ancient Hebrew people understand happened in a time, in a realm, in an existence that we don't understand. This is the mystical, this is the mysteries of the Bible. And so my question was answered with that. The second rabbi helped me to understand that, yes, the ancient literature does indicate that, yes, there's a mysteriousness to the creation story. There's something else happened. Now, it's important to understand this moving forward when we talk about being divided. I just wanted to set the stage for you. It's not to get you to go down that rabbit hole like I did, trying to figure out what was there pre-Adamic races, whatever, but it's to understand this, that in the beginning of our story, where you and I live today, where you and I are now, it started as the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the deep. The deep of what? The deep of something dark, chaotic, and messy. It was void. It was empty. It was a mess. Now then, this is where we began. This is for us. This is the revelation given to you and to me of where our lives now pick up. Now, the very first thing, according to the ancient literature, that God did was he spoke into the darkness and the chaoticness and the mess and the emptiness. He spoke into it. And we know what God said. He says, let there be light, according to the ancient literature. Let there be light. He spoke a response into the darkness. So the darkness was there. It was chaos. It was mess. And God said, let there be light. This is the response, the first response. And now watch this. God said he saw the light and that it was good. So not only did he speak light as a response to the darkness, but he gave it a quality, this light that he's talking about. He gave it a value. He says, I see the darkness, I see the chaoticness, I see the mess. Now, this right here, I'm going to speak this in, and I'm going to give it a value. I'm going to give it a quality that's opposite of the darkness that is existing before me. The value is that it is good. And if you look into the Hebrew word meaning in the ancient Hebrew literature of good, it means it's pleasant, it's agreeable, meaning God agrees with it. This is something I agree with. Now, I want to say this right now. This is the most interesting thing. Again, this is the mysteries. This is a mysticism. This is the mystical side of the Bible. But how many of you are aware that we're not talking about the creation of the sun or the moon or the stars yet? Because the sun, the moon, the stars, the heavenly celestial bodies, if you will, were not even created or mentioned until the third day, later on in Genesis, where it says God created the heavenly bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars, and put them in the heavens. We're not even there yet. So this light that we're talking about is completely different. The light that God is speaking into the darkness is a value. The light is a concept. It's an idea. It's a principle. It's a rule. It's a law that God is speaking into the darkness and calling it good. He's speaking of value. You follow me? And now watch this. We know that God did not say this. God did not say, let there be light, and light completely eradicate and get rid of darkness forever. Be gone, darkness. Get out of here. There is no darkness. It's all light. Darkness be gone. Is that what he did? No. What does the ancient literature say? The ancient literature says that God divided. He separated them. How many of you have heard the sayings that, evil doesn't drive out evil? I believe it's Martin Luther King says, evil does not drive out evil. Only light can do that. Darkness doesn't drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate doesn't drive out hate. Only love can do that. Okay? When we talk about driving out, what we have to understand is that what it really means is create division. Driving out something does not mean you can eradicate it. God did not eradicate darkness. He did not get rid of darkness. And some of you are saying, why? Why would God not completely get rid of all darkness and that the power to create light and overwhelm the darkness? Why leave it? Well, now you're getting into a different idea, but we do know this, that at this moment where God said, let there be light, and then he divided the light from the darkness and the emptiness, and we have these two. Now, God is able to say, I am the God of both. And we see this, you'll see this later on in Deuteronomy and other places where God says, I am the God. I am God over good and evil. I'm God over darkness and light. I cause my sun to rise on both the light and the dark, on both the good and the evil, because in the beginning, he established this, that I'm creating light and I'm going to divide it and keep it separate from what's dark. By the way, what is darkness? What is voidness? What is chaos? Because Genesis doesn't tell us, but it does. Because the moment God says he saw the light and he saw that it was good, it's pleasant, it's agreeable, that automatically assigns a value to the darkness, to the chaos, to the mess, to the void that was there that God responded to. The value to it is that it's not good, it's not pleasant, it's not agreeable. It's the opposite, and that's all we need to know. It's all we need to know. Some of you want to know, and I do too, what's the value of being bad and what's of evil, and what's the value of being dark, and what's the value of staying in the shadows in life? Nothing. There's no value to it. And this is how, in the ancient literature, this is how God established it according to the ancient people. There's no value assigned to darkness. There's no value assigned to chaos and to messes and voidness and lawlessness, and there's no value assigned to that. There's nothing. There's only value assigned to light. And some of us are so desiring to know, well, what is this light? Well, we know the light has been given a value. It's good, it's pleasant, it's agreeable. We're later going to find out that this light has a lot to do with the role of Jesus. Jesus came in and said, I am that light. I am what God, I am that answer. I am what was spoken in. It represents truth. The light is represented by truth. It's pleasant, it's agreeable, it's truth, and it shines bright, right? All right. In fact, if you look at the New Testament, John goes crazy in the New Testament. Guys, in the opening, you could read it. Right? 1 John. Guys, this light that we've all been talking about in the ancient Hebrew text, this light, this was the Jesus that was here. You guys don't get it. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word became flesh, and all this and that. This is what he's talking about. This light from the beginning, he was excited. This light, this is the Jesus that was here. This is the light, guys. I figured it out. That's what John. By the way, I believe that nobody has this stuff figured out completely, especially when we talk about the mystical and the mysteries of the ancient literature. Don't let any pastor or preacher or even me or anybody say, yeah, this is what it means exactly, and we got it figured out, because we don't. There's a reason why the rabbis were telling me you're getting into the mysticism, the mystical side, because it's not necessarily for us entirely to understand, but we can get the principle behind it. We need to understand the principle of this, that darkness was allowed to stay. Light was brought in as a response, and it was divided. And now let's apply this to our lives moving forward. Let's apply this to where we're at, because some of you wish there was no division. Some of you wish, and lots of people out there wish there was no division whatsoever. Can't we all just get along? We can't. No. We've experienced this firsthand, and with narcissistic abuse, with people there's people out there who are so drenched in the darkness, the absence of light. They do horrible things in humanity. Why? Get rid of all that stuff. God's answer to it was the creation of light, right? And now you and I have a choice. This is where free will becomes so important, and perhaps free will was important from the beginning. A lot of people want to say, I don't want to worship God because it's a slave thing. I don't want to get into that. No, it's not. There's absolutely freedom of choice. In fact, it says in Deuteronomy, God says, I have set before you life, death, blessings, cursing, light, darkness. Choose what side you're going to be on. Choose who you will serve. And basically says, choose wisely, choose good, so that you and your children may live. God spoke light and truth into a situation that was chaotic and messy and dark, and says, I will establish this now as a part of humankind's free will before humanity was even made. And humans and mankind will choose if they like the darkness or if they want to be in the light. Now, God is God of both. But we have the option. We get the choice. That was a part of free will that was already established in the beginning. And a lot of people would say, why would God give people that choice? Well, listen, again, this goes back to why didn't God just say, let there be nothing but light and drive it out? Listen, that place exists, and it's called heaven. where it's consumed by the light of God, the light. We're not talking about the sun, but a light. It's consumed by the value of light, and there is no darkness. That's heaven. But here, on this place that we have a short time on, there is a divide, light and darkness. And we choose. And I believe as we choose what side we're on here, according to the ancient literature, what they're telling us, this is basically what's going to carry on to the next. Do we choose a life in light, or do we choose to live a life without light and in the shadows? Now, it's very hard when you're in darkness to see the light. With a friend of mine that said it like this. He put it perfectly. You could be standing out in the sunshine, in the light, saying it's amazing, it's glorious being in the light. Somebody else has their back up against a wall where the light's casting a shadow, and all that person sees is the shadow, and you're saying, hey, this sun, this light's amazing. The person's saying, all I see is a shadow. And you want to tell them, well, just get away from the wall. But they can't. It's not that easy. Many of you get wrapped up with people in life this way. And we try to pull them away from the wall, narcissistically abusive people. We try to bring them over to the other side of the divide, out of the shadows, into the light, but they don't want to go. Why? At some point in life, that wall became their comfort. It's their barrier. They like the wall that casts shadows, and they're living in a life that they see everything as a shadow. You can't pull them away from it. They have to be led away. They have to be led away. It's important for you and I to understand. It's also important for you and I to understand that no, there cannot be peace between the two sides. There cannot be peace between light and darkness, real divide. Again, it's not race. It's not religion even. It's not politics. The divide is between truth and what's good and pleasant and what is dark and chaotic and lawless and messy and out of order. That's the divide. And a lot of people want to put race to this and race to that and associate. It's not. It's choice. That's divide. This is why families are divided. This is why marriages get divided. It's nothing to do with race. Nothing to do with any of that stuff. It's divided because at some point there's the two sides become, one is for good. One is for wanting to do the right thing. Another one is for dark. One is for, the other one's wanting to live in shadows, wanting to make choices that are not good, that are not pleasant, that are not agreeable. This becomes the divide, and it's supposed to be. What did God do with the light and the darkness? Separated them. They can't exist together. They're polar opposites. You're wondering why you can't get along with a narcissistically abusive person. You can't fit in with a bully, tyrannical marriage partner. You can't get along with parents who are doing drugs. You can't get along with alcoholics. You can't get along with bullies and fighting. Why? Because light and darkness, truth and what's pleasant cannot fit in with chaos and emptiness. It can't. It's a principle that was established in the beginning when the ancient literature says God divided the light from the dark. That divide exists. So whether or not you want to know, even if you want to, if you are in a place where you are trying and working to stand for truth and you're trying to seek for a better life and you are dealing with people who are aggressive and they're in the shadows, you can say all day long, come out in the light, be in the light with me. They're going to look at you and say, all I see is the shadows because they're on that side of the divide. And there is a divide. There is a divide. The best you can do is from a distance pray for them and show them love. But remember the divide. We all need to remember we need to stop trying to be one with the divide. You cannot abolish divide, because if you abolish and get rid of divide, you're getting rid of God's very first principle according to the ancient literature. You're trying to get away from something that he created, something that he established. You're enmeshing good and bad. And that, I believe personally, is when actually bad starts to consume the good. We see this in modern Christianity. We see this in Western churches where the dark and pleasant actually draw in the light and start to darken the light. The light starts to get dim. right? This is why we have churches that allow so many things. We have churches that become agreeable to bullies and violence and all these kinds of things that happen, to money grabbing, all this kinds of stuff, and it dims the light. That's the risk. When you don't want to stay, this is the problem with modern Western churches becoming so huge. So much darkness has infiltrated the church, and it starts to change the message. It dims the light. Now, watch this. When the light starts to dim, we're heading right back towards the place that existed before the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the dark deep and said, "Let there be light," again. Do you follow me? So, in the ancient literature, God created the heavens and the earth. It was beautiful, it was glorious. And Job, we see that the angels were singing for glory. It was a celebration. There was light. Then something took place and the light grew dim. The light grew dim on the earth that was created. The light went out. And what's left is dark, void, empty. And then God spoke into the situation, "Let there be light," creating this division. And that, my friends, is the message for today. And I challenge you, as always, read these things for yourself and look into this ancient literature. Try to gain and understand why it is you're divided, even from abusive people, from narcissistic people. I know you feel there's a divide as well. I do as well. But again, I challenge you to look at the context, look at what we're talking about. How many of you see there's protests and things out there, but there's no problem with protesting, right? But how many of you see chaos and violence and riots? Now all of a sudden, wait a minute. No, there's a divide. Some people try and say, well, some of the riots is because of the protest. No. What we're seeing here is the actual polar opposites. There's a reason there's a divide. Because one is lawless and chaotic and rude and a mess. Right? So in every element, and again, it has nothing to do with race. This has nothing to do, because division, again, we see it in families, we see division everywhere. It has nothing to do with what they're telling us. It's a simple matter of the light that's been established, that is good, been assigned value. Light is good, and the opposite of light, which is darkness, chaos, and a mess. Now, let's apply this in our lives moving forward, right? As we meet people and we get involved with situations, as we stay away from narcissists, from abusive individuals, as the world starts to transform, we're going to see more darkness. It's always been there. It's never gone away. It's always been a part of this. It is, from what I just explained, what we just saw in the ancient literature, darkness was here first in our story, until God spoke light, according to the ancient literature. The ancients are trying to tell us that darkness was the beginning of our story. We were built on a place that was dark and void and empty and had no value. How it got to that place, that's the mystical part of God. That's the mysticism in the story. We don't have all the answers. We have glimpses, but we don't have all the answers of how that came to be. But what we know for sure is that the earth began, the world began. Life as you and I know it, our story began on a very dark, formless, void, empty place. And then God said, "Let there be light." He answered that and then allowed the division to stay for the rest of our time here. And this is our story. This is where we live. This is our story. This is our existence in a world that has both good and evil, darkness and light. And when we talk about driving it out, what that means now, if you want to know, how do we drive out darkness then from our lives? Be a light. If you are a light, if we are a light, darkness will not overpower you. But you cannot take your light and walk into a situation of darkness expecting to change into light. No, the darkness will run. Many of you are saying, listen, I can't be a light around narcissists and around bullies, and I can't be a light. They either attack me or they leave. Yes. You're experiencing firsthand what narcissists and bullies and what darkness does when light is entered into the picture. It divides, it scatters. If you ever walked into an old garage and lit a candle, torch, watch the bugs, the rodents scatter, run away from the light, it scares them. How many of you are aware that just because you have a light does not mean you're going to walk into a situation and everybody else is going to start possessing your light? No, you're not called to make everybody a light like you. You're called just to be a light. And yes, that's going to scare some people. Yes, some people are going to run away. Some people are going to badmouth you. Narcissistic people are going to abuse you, or they're going to run from you. Whatever they can do, because they don't want to, listen, all they see is shadows. They're the ones with the backs against the wall saying, you see sunshine, I see shadows. And that sunshine scares me. I just want to see the shadow. Okay? This is why there's a divide. You're not going to change the narcissistic person to be a light like you. You're going to scare them. They're going to run away from you. Maybe scare is a strong word. You're going to irritate them. Kind of like when you walk outside and you see a blinding sun, it can be irritating. It's not necessarily scary, but it's irritating, and you want to go back in and protect your eyes. The same is true with narcissists, bullies, evil. It's irritating, the light to them. It's an annoyance to them. And so this is why they fight aggressively and they run. But this is an establishment from the beginning. When God spoke, let there be light, and then he divided the light. He assigned the light value, and he says the light is good, and he divided that from the darkness. He scattered the darkness away from that. It still exists, but they can't be together. And that's what I got for this message, and I will be back next Saturday for another Royal We Fellowship. I hope that you found this insightful, and I challenge you to also dig in, read, research, stay on the side of light, invite your friends, invite whoever else may benefit from this Saturday morning fellowship of the Royal We. All right, everybody, have a good, blessed day.